Hey guys, so today I have swatches of the OPI Spring Collection. This is the Me, Myself, and OPI collection. So there are 12 polishes here altogether. You can find these at beyondpolish.com, so I will link that website down below. I also have a coupon/affiliate code with Beyond Polish, which will be here and in the description box. 12 polishes altogether, and I will get into the swatches.
So the first polish is called Blinded by the Ring Light, and OPI just describes this as a pastel yellow. This was a little bit sheer and a little bit streaky on the first coat, but really nothing out of the ordinary for a pastel yellow. So I didn't love the coverage on this in 2 coats. It does look a lot better on camera than it did in person, but there were still some flaws and some darker spots that I wanted to cover up. So I added a 3rd coat, and that 3rd coat did cover completely. So that is 3 coats of Blinded by the Ring Light. The next polish is called Pink in Bio, and OPI describes this as a light pink cream. This was also a little bit sheer and streaky on the first coat, but still nothing unusual for a color that's this light. So I didn't love the coverage on the 2nd coat here. Again, it looked a lot better on camera than it did in person. I also flooded my cuticle, and this is like a wild ride that I left in because it was just so ridiculous. I flooded my cuticle, tried to clean it up. As I was cleaning it up, I dropped I don't even know what it was. I think it was a crumb from my food, but I'm not really sure where it came from. It just kind of appeared on my nail, and then I had to scrape it off, and it was a total disaster. But while fixing it, I also got a pretty good shot of how well this polish self-levels, because I was just able to put a little blob on there and go back over it, and it just melted all into itself with no streaks or ridges. This also covered completely for me in 3 coats, and I flooded my cuticles like 18 times this day on a bunch of different collections and a bunch of different formulas, so I don't know what was wrong with me. So have fun watching that for the next several videos. So that is 3 coats of Pink in Bio. The next polish is called Clear Your Cache, and OPI describes this as a honeydew. So this one was also a bit sheer and uneven on that first coat. I do think it was a little more sheer than the previous 2 polishes. This is one that I feel like could have been a little more opaque. Like, I'll make excuses for a pastel yellow or a really light pink, but this shade I feel like could have been more opaque. It was still a little bit uneven for me on that 2nd coat, which again looked a lot better on camera than it did in person, so I ended up adding a 3rd, which covered completely. So that is 3 coats of Clear Your Cache. The next polish is called NFTease Me, and OPI describes this as a turquoise cream. So this one was also a little bit streaky on the first coat, but I wrote in my notes that I felt like I was being really clunky with the application, which might have something to do with it. That being said, the 2nd coat did still cover completely for me. I couldn't see any flaws or any reason to need a 3rd coat. I did flood my cuticle again, which is always good to see, but this is a nice solid 2-coat polish. And I was being fairly picky this day, so I'm confident with 2 coats here. So that is 2 coats of NFTease Me. The next polish is called Meta My Soulmate, and OPI describes this as a baby pink pearl. Good formula on this, a little bit sheer and does have some brush strokes, but admittedly much less on the brush strokes than I thought it was going to be just from the description being pearl. I kind of hold my breath a little bit when I see this kind of finish because historically they can be really, really bad for brush strokes. But honestly, they settled in pretty well after the polish dried, and I mean, you can still see some of them, but not nearly as much as I would expect from a polish described as pearl. I also only did 2 coats. I could see a little bit of nail line, but I felt like it kind of worked for this finish, so I let it be. So that is 2 coats of Meta My Soulmate. The next polish is called Switch to Portrait Mode, and this is described as a powder pink pearl. So this is also sheer on the first coat, but again, fairly minimal brush strokes for being a very pearly polish, and what's there also melt in really well. I mean, you still want to try to make them as straight as possible, which is me overworking the polish here, but for the most part, they're going to be fairly minimal. These 2 colors, while not my favorite, did make me kind of rethink my opinion on pearly polishes, because this is a level of brush stroke that I could deal with. I also left this alone at 2 coats for the same reason as the last polish, a little bit of nail line showing, but overall the color was even, so I thought it kind of worked with the look of the color. So that is 2 coats of Switch to Portrait Mode. The next polish is called Data Peach, and OPI describes this as a pearly peach. You guys know I love a good peachy, pinky, gold shimmer kind of combo. I do feel like the brush strokes were a little bit more apparent in this one, not a ton, and still a lot better than what I would expect from anything with pearl in the description, but a little bit worse, maybe just because that gold shimmer is a little more contrasting. And I did only need 2 coats for this one as well, but I did not have the visible nail line that I had with 2 coats of the previous 2 pearl finish polishes. So that is 2 coats of Data Peach. The next polish is called Silicon Valley Girl, and OPI describes this as tangerine orange cream. This is orange. It's so orange. I really like the formula though. It's very, very good, really smooth, levels out really nicely, and covers really well. Also, I did do 2 coats, which covered completely, and I do feel like it dried just a little bit darker than it was when it was wet. So that is 2 coats of Silicon Valley Girl. The next color is called Spring Break the Internet, and this is described as a shimmery hot pink. This is very sparkly, fairly sheer kind of pink jelly polish. I did have like way too much on my first coat, and I ended up swiping a bit off of my nail and putting it back in the bottle. You can see here I was thinning that coat out a bit. For as sheer as it was on the first coat, it did build up pretty well on the second coat. I had a very tiny bit of nail line, which you can kind of see here on camera, but it wasn't enough for me to feel like I needed a third coat. So that is 2 coats of Spring Break the Internet. The next color is called Incognito Mode, and this is described as a purple mauve cream. This had a very similar formula to Silicon Valley Girl. It was very smooth. It evened out very well. It applied really buttery and delicious and great. It did cover completely for me in 2 coats, and I do feel like it dried just a little bit darker than it was when it was wet. I always try to point that out because you can really tell when I stack that second coat on top of the first one, even though I don't think that's going to affect the average DIY at-home manicurist that much. So that is 2 coats of Incognito Mode. The next polish is called I Sold My Crypto, and this is described as a shimmery violet. This is very sheer, but it is fairly even, and it has a nice pink shimmer to it. I feel like you could use this as a topper, but it would almost have to be over darker colors if you don't want that purple base to tint what you're putting it over. I think a lighter color is going to show some purple tint because the base is just a little bit opaque for a topper. I was pretty happy with this in 2 coats, but I did want to add a third just to see what kind of coverage I could get because of how sheer it started out, and it was pretty good. I really couldn't make out much nail line. So that is 3 coats of I Sold My Crypto. And lastly, we have Left Your Texts on Red, and this is described as a shimmery red. So because of that shimmer in here, this one comes off a bit more of a jelly so that it doesn't hide the shimmer, but it is a very saturated red jelly. The shimmer that's scattered around in there is pretty subtle, but it still looks nice. It's just a little extra something to make it not just a red polish. And this did cover completely for me in 2 coats. Okay, almost completely. I had a little bit of nail line showing, but I didn't think it was enough to do a third. So that is 2 coats of Left Your Texts on Red.
This was another kind of lame, very red and orange and pink heavy OPI collection. I think this is probably my least favorite of all of the spring collections that I've sat down and talked about today, just because the spread of colors does nothing for me. And that's a very personal opinion, but my favorite here is going to be NFTease Me. Really, really like this light shade of blue. I gravitate towards blue. It really stands out amongst all of these like corally red orange shades that are in here. So that is the Me, Myself, and OPI collection for spring 2023. Again, you can find those at beyondpolish.com, so I will link that website down below. I also have a coupon/affiliate code with Beyond Polish, which will be here and in the description box. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will talk to you later. Bye.